just trying to be really conscientious about sort of maintaining balance,
sure.
In a kind of like a very like man-made, farming is really a manipulation of nature. So we're like trying to do the best that we can while really controlling something.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast.
I get to meet so many cool people as I do this podcast. Welcome to this week of the Real Food, Real People podcast as our journey continues all over Washington State to get to know the real people behind our food. I followed Lowlands Farm on Instagram a while back, and Alice with Lowlands messaged me back, said, "Hey, thanks for the follow." She is from the same town as me growing up. No idea. So I reached out to her and said, "Hey, would you be willing to be on the podcast and talk about your experience growing up in the farming community that I grew up in too?" I didn't know her, obviously. And then now down in Snohomish, where she's farming now, doing a really different type of farming and all of the things that she's done in between. She shares her story, pretty fascinating how she got to be where she is now. You're going to enjoy this conversation. Her name is Alice VanderHaak. She's the owner of Lowlands Farm, again in Snohomish, and she has a lot of cool insights to share about our food system and about the challenges of farming, big and small, and everything in between. Our sponsors are the Dairy Farmers of Washington. Thank you to them for supporting this podcast. And also remember that it is June, so it's Dairy Month. And lots of focus on things that are happening on dairy farms. Go to wadairy.org to see some pretty cool stories about what's happening on Washington dairy farms. Again, wadairy.org for the Dairy Farmers of Washington website. Also, Manna Insurance Group. A friend of mine from high school owns that company and connected and wanted to support what we're doing here. So we really appreciate his support, and we appreciate what they do at Manna Insurance Group, which is not just picking up the pieces when things go wrong, but having a plan ahead of time and making sure to protect your family's financial future, whether it's, they do home and auto insurance, they do farms, all that kind of stuff. Again, Manna Insurance Group. Check them out online. They have locations here in Washington, as well as down in California and in Arizona. And then also Washington Red Raspberry supporting the podcast. We appreciate their help to put these episodes out and have these conversations. It's almost red raspberry harvest time around here. That's where I'm at. That's my background. So best of luck to those red raspberry farmers out there. And then Williams as well, powering your clean energy future. They support the podcast with a community grant as well. So thank you to all of those folks. Let's go now to Snohomish, where we sat down and had a great conversation with Alice VanderHaak of Lowlands Farm. How did you become a farmer?
Wow, that's a great question. Right out the gate. I guess, I grew up in Whatcom County, and so farming was always something that was there. I think like everyone, I had a summer berry job. I've had every job you can think of in the berries. And then in high school, I started working on a dairy farm. And that was just like that. This is a job you can have as a kid, so that's what I did. I don't think I ever imagined that farming would be my career or something I would come back to. I think in retrospect, the path was very straight, but mentally the path was very winding. So
you couldn't see it from...
Totally. It feels like very surprising to me, but looking back, it was very clear. So I think just that exposure... those summer jobs that kind of laid the foundation for sort of understanding agriculture. Through my education, I studied food and nutrition. And so it was very early on in kind of diving into that world that the idea of having a mixed vegetable farm and kind of these other areas of agriculture just were really interesting to me. And so it didn't take me too long to kind of dive into that scene And since then, that's almost all that I've done.
So that was like a bachelor's degree thing, or was that
Yes. A bachelor's and a master's.
both
Yeah.
focused on the same
Yes.
stuff?
Yep.
And so you were doing education, and then once you got done,
Yeah,
what'd you do?
I did farming all in the middle of it. So I started working for a farm. I went to school in Seattle. I started working at the farmer's market for a farm, vending. As soon as I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I did an apprenticeship on a farm. I stayed there for 2 seasons before I went back to school. I quit school to farm again, quit farming to go back to school again, and then ended up doing this. So it's always kind of been what I wanted to do, and it's just taken me time to kind of align the heart and the head and the action.
So all this farming that you were doing all along before this, which is Lowlands Farm,
this
which
is
we'll
Lowlands Farm.
we will get to in a minute, because
great.
I have so many questions to find out.
Happy to answer them all.
But what kind of farming were you doing? Like what were you getting your hands dirty with?
All vegetable farming. Yeah, so smaller, I guess, like relatively small scale. I've worked on some larger produce farms, relatively larger.
Yeah.
But all produce farming. Yep.
And like you said, you were connected with the farmer's market as well.
Yeah.
So in what capacity were you connected
Yeah, so I just started shopping at the farmer's market. Like as a college student, I was really fascinated. This was like 12 years ago now. So this was like a new idea to me. I started shopping there. My employer, I was like working a food service job, and my employer at the time was like, "Oh, have you heard of this farm? Like they do this thing called internships." And so I immediately was like, "This is it." And in my like higher education world, to me, an internship meant like very hard to get. Like I need to be prepared. So I was like, I need to get a job working for a farm at the market so I can get this internship to learn how to grow vegetables. So I just applied basically and got this job. And then that really was a gateway for me to meeting like all the farmers who vend at the markets in Seattle. And I was able to create relationships with farmers and really kind of choose where I wanted to like learn and work. And that was a pretty awesome, like looking back, that was super pivotal because I felt like I got to kind of learn about all these different operations and kind of choose a place that felt like a good fit for me. So.
And then you decided to strike out on your own.
Yeah. Well, there's like some winding paths before that. Yeah, so one of the other farms that operates on this property where I lease, One Leaf Farm, the owner of that business, Rand, really gave me an opportunity to work with her in like a leadership and management capacity. And so I did that for a couple seasons before I went back to school. And that's how I landed at this location. That was kind of like my introduction to this physical location, and really gave me really a incredible opportunity to really learn like what it takes to run a farm business, which I think you just can't know until you do. And so I think everything leading up to that was really important, but that was like a pivotal. So that's how I got to this physical location.
And then when did the concept come along?
Yeah.
I mean, was the physical location first, or did you already have kind of the idea in your head of what you wanted to do?
That's a great question. I think that I've always wanted to farm. I think earlier on I felt really overwhelmed by the kind of all of the decision making and like managing people. It felt like a huge responsibility, and that seemed really stressful to me. So I was pretty jazzed to work for other people. And I think that at the time that I felt ready to start my own farm, it's kind of a funny thing to think. I was really just like looking for a moment of like just, I want to say like rest, but it's not restful. I like just wanted to do something for myself for a minute. I had just finished school. I had like another stressful job in between there. And I was like, I just want to try. I'm just going to like take it easy this season. my personality took over like immediately. So it's not, I haven't taken it easy, but I think that I was just looking for a moment to kind of make my own decisions and like be on my own, to kind of just, take a step back. And then, like I said, it's been like a really exponential growth since then. But that's kind of what got me here. And I think without that opportunity to like learn the ins and outs of running a business, I think I wouldn't have had the like courage or the experience to realize that's something that I could do too. So I think that part of it was just like that being a really important opportunity for me.
What do you do at Lowlands Farm? So talk about what the farm is.
Yeah, so we grow on about 5 acres. We do mixed vegetables and cut flowers. Mm-hmm. We mostly sell through a CSA, so that's Community Supported Agriculture, which is kind of a subscription program. We have a group of members. They purchase their share of the farm in the winter and early spring, and then we deliver a box to them from early June through early November. And that's kind of the core of what we do. We also sell a little bit wholesale. We have some other outlets that, we sell to a few restaurants, a few florists, kind of some like this and that, but our core of our farm is the CSA.
No farmers market?
No farmers market.
Why not?
I know. It's wild.
Yeah.
After 10 years. I think originally I didn't want to work on the weekends, or I didn't want something that I had to do on the weekends. I still work on the weekends, but I don't have to be somewhere at a specific time. And I think I wanted that break. I think that a lot of the like more established farmers markets are really challenging to get into as a new business. And there's kind of a process of like proving your reliability and the quality of your product to kind of get into those spaces. And so in my first year, that just wasn't available to me. And I think, I knew enough about running a business that I didn't want to spend all of the time and energy to sell at a market where I couldn't like break even or make a profit. So I was like, I'm going to go big or I'm going to do something else. And it was like going big at the market wasn't possible in that first year. And there's always been a CSA operating out like on this farm site. And the year that I decided to kind of come back and get growing, the opportunity to sort of take on those members became available. And so that just, I really like it. I like the personal relationships. I like how I get to communicate. And I really like that I get to kind of control how I maintain those relationships. So it was a good fit. And then it's just has kind of like grown and grown since then.
I think there's something that makes so much sense about a CSA in that you get the money up front.
Yeah.
Not to be too much about the money.
Totally.
But that helps you invest real dollars
Totally.
in what you're doing rather than going into debt, which is the traditional farming model, is you go into debt and hope you get paid for it in the end.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it really gives our members a chance to, I think people want to know how to help. They want direction on like how to get funneled into support. And I think it's a really clear way to say, this is how you can help. We're going to set it up for you so that you can support us at this time of year and we can offer you these products at this time of year. And I think, my members love knowing that like, this is what gets my staff like more work hours, like more, just like year-round labor. It's like what's helping to kind of ease that burden. And I think that they appreciate that like reciprocity too.
Well, because people want a connection with their food.
Totally.
And that is a way to do it.
Yeah, yep.
Because then they have ownership in the food that they are eating and putting on the table.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, it creates a really direct relationship for sure. Yeah.
What about the scaling challenge with that, though? Like, how big can you go with a CSA? Obviously, that's not going to work for probably the majority of people. Yeah.
I think that as a consumer, there are unique challenges in getting a box of food delivered to you that you haven't chosen and that you may not know how to eat. I think I kind of think about two things. Like, one is my responsibility to find the customers that do and can do that. That's my job and how I communicate about what I do in my business. And then my other responsibility is guiding people through that process. And I think that's where some of my education is really helpful.
Yeah.
And we put so much work into that like guiding relationship. We do tons of resources. We are sending them recipes, tips, videos. Like, we're putting together this whole like almost course basically to like help them change and adapt to this like random box of food that they're going to get. So
Well, and that's what a lot of people, including myself, need sometimes.
Totally.
Because I wouldn't go buy X veggies at the store probably,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
have them. So what am I going to do with them?
Totally. Yeah.
And then I learned, hey, I really like these if you prepare them this way or whatever.
Yes.
Also, I would think your background in nutrition helps because you can give people a balance of things that they need in a box, depending on what you have at a given time.
Yeah, and I think I really steer clear of like trying to tell people like what to eat or like what's good for them.
Yeah.
I think that for me, the relationship and the meaningfulness and connection is what's important to me.
Yeah.
And I think if anything, I have an understanding of, I know what people eat. I've had experience where I just know through the market, through my education, I have a good sense of like how people cook and eat. Right. And so I think that's helpful. And then I think having experience just also cooking and eating at home and studying that, we are trying to put together boxes that are balanced, that are usable, that match what recipes call for, and trying to make the kind of user experience really friendly and appropriate.
So we keep talking about veggies in the abstract. What are they? What do you guys have in your boxes? What do you all grow?
Like everything. Yeah, as much as we can. I think that's fun for me. Everything's a new challenge. We do a lot of like salad greens, bunched greens, all of the root crops.
Like carrots,
beets, radishes, turnips. Herbs. We've got, in the summer, we have like zucchini, cucumbers, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, tomatillos. And then it's like winter squash we transition into winter squash and like those really hardy roots. And
some of those root crops you can keep in the ground for almost all winter if you get lucky, right?
Yes, that's kind of an interesting thing about here is that we're in the floodplain. So our season is pretty truncated by the risk of flood. So we don't really risk leaving anything in the ground. So our season kind of has a hard stop for us. I think you could harvest those things and you could store them in a cooler or a storage area. Right. But we always can possibly flood. So we kind of don't try to extend our season too much. We have kind of other things that we do to try to keep income coming in the winter.
What about the flowers?
Yeah.
What's that experience been like?
Yeah, that's been really cool for me. I think like growing up, my family was very practical and cut flowers like weren't something we had. You know, my mom was an avid gardener, so I have had a lot of exposure to like beauty and flowers, but this idea of growing something like just to enjoy was really new for me. And it's been really, I think, special for me, and in the sense that it's a whole new challenge. Not that like farming for 10 years is very long, but that I had been farming for almost 10 years before I started my farm. So it was like this new thing I'd never tried before. So that has been fun, like a great new challenge. And then I think also just the positivity of having something so beautiful around really impacts my work, my staff's work. I think my customers like love having flowers. And so that has been a really cool like component of our farm. And I kind of gave myself a couple of seasons to figure out if that was like a viable a viable thing to do, and we're kind of picking up steam, so that feels fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. Whatever is like, I love a challenge. I'm like, I'll try a new thing. Let me try. Yeah. I want to be good at that too, you know? So
How many things can you possibly be good at, though?
Not everything. Yeah. It's always worth a try, though.
Yeah, because like my dad's a red raspberry grower. He doesn't want to do anything else because he's so
Totally.
like, laser focused on his raspberries.
Yes, this is definitely like a jack of all trades, master of none situation. It's like knowing a little bit about a lot of things. And I think for me that is part of where the fun is that every season is a chance to like learn more about one thing or try to perfect something a little bit more, to like hit that first, like really dial in that first round of carrots. And it's always changing. And I think that's really fun for me. I think I have so much respect and definitely dream of also just kind of really focusing and being like incredible at one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's awesome.
So what's the secret to growing amazing veggies and flowers? Like,
oh my gosh.
What does it take?
That's a great question. I don't know yet. I think probably a lot of determination. I think for me, getting experience in advance of starting my own business is really critical. I think I'm like saying this not as an expert, but I think that we really like underestimate how technical the work is, and it seems like something really easy to get into. And so for me, really understanding and like getting work experience and sort of developing those technical skills in advance, I think that's really important.
So now, how long have you been doing Lowlands Farm?
I'm headed into my fourth season. Yes.
And you had 10 years of farming experience before that.
That might also include this.
Anyway.
How old am I?
10,
Quite a
12,
few.
13,
Yes.
14 years,
Sure.
whatever it's been.
Almost 10, I think. Yep.
If you could go back now and tell 0 or 1 year experience some things to do,
Sure.
what would you say?
Yeah, like wear sunscreen, protect your back at all costs.
Some bad burns out working in the field?
I think respecting my body more like would have been great advice. I think I threw myself into it. I wanted to like prove that I could do anything, and I think that's just like hard on you.
Yeah, respecting your body. What do you mean, like physically overexerting?
Totally. Yeah, like physically overexerting, like, making sure you're like well nourished, well hydrated, like wearing sunscreen. Those seem so self-care, basically.
Getting enough sleep.
Yeah, all those things, I think.
Taking time off.
Wow.
Farmers don't know about that, but
no, yeah.
It is a self-care important
totally
thing.
I think I still give myself that same advice, but I think that would be a big one, is like play the long game and really take care of your body and consider it your greatest tool, because it is. And I think I really burned out quick early on.
Yeah.
I think that would be a big one, maybe because I'm like feeling that now in my 30s. I'm like, okay, like how am I going to keep doing this?
Yeah, isn't it great?
Yeah, it is great. I also think like something that I struggle with a lot is like this idea of progress over perfection. And I think that's something I would tell my past self and my current self, is like, just like you're getting better all the time, and like there isn't this moment or this one goal.
That's good advice for anybody.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, I'm like, this is a constant mantra, but I think at that point I felt like there was like this thing I was gonna achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the destination that you're waiting to arrive at?
Yeah. And there isn't really one.
So it's the journey and making sure that you're progressing while you go.
Totally. Yeah.
What about with the dirt and the plants and the actual like farming practices and stuff? What
Sure.
would you go back and tell yourself 10 plus years ago?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Everything I'm thinking is like take notes.
Yeah.
You know, like these things I tell my crew now, like pay attention to what's going on around you, like look at the cycles of what's happening, like take really good notes, like be observant, ask questions. I think that, you know, one of the really cool things about like working for another person is you have all of their experience to draw on and sort of learn from. And I think like in me trying to like race and be the fastest transplanter, I like probably wasn't soaking in everything I could have. I think like, just being like taking good notes, being observant, some of those things, I think. I think
There's a lot of science, but there's some art.
Oh yeah.
To it.
I'm a lot more in the art category, I think. I think the science feels like I want to solve the math problem, and it's such a big math problem that I'm so overwhelmed about getting the right answer that then nothing happens. And so I have to kind of just make decisions. And so sometimes it becomes more art just because it's complicated. Yeah.
You're jogging my memory to random things in my brain because I'm not a numbers math person.
Yeah.
I'm a verbal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I always struggled with that. But one thing I do remember from probably some algebra class which was about the farthest I went in math. I never got into all the calculus and that stuff that just makes my brain explode.
Yeah.
But like the matrix concept, not the movie, but just a simple mathematical matrix comes back to my mind all the time when you're dealing with something with all these different variables. And that's farming, right?
Totally.
Your soil, your nutrients, your bugs, timing, weather, physical skill of how you put stuff in the ground.
Totally.
And it's like this whole matrix with all these numbers that represent variables, and you change one of them and the whole equation changes.
Yes.
And then figuring out and that's the part where what you're saying I'm totally tracking with, because that part is so overwhelming to me.
It is. Yeah, it is overwhelming. And in the moment, it's like the sort of decision fatigue in the moment is real. And then again, it's like then I'm growing 100 different things. So that's wild. But do you just kind of like keep doing what you're doing because you have the momentum, or do you like pivot and then you're thinking, I think about how that affects all of the people, you know, and like all my crew, and there's a lot of decisions, and sometimes in the moment it's the art and not the science.
And just progress, because you won't get that matrix decision making perfect. There's no way.
Yeah, exactly.
There's just it's too complex.
Yes. Yeah, it is complicated.
So, of all the stuff that you grow, what's your favorite?
Oh, I don't know. I think.
What is the most delicious thing that comes off of your farm?
Well, that's really subjective.
In your opinion.
I don't know. I don't really know. There's so many things I love growing for different reasons, like how it grows, how I harvest it, how it tastes. I've been on a really like a big pak choy kick. That's been like just a joy to grow and harvest. But I think maybe it's like hard to beat like a cherry tomato or a fresh carrot. Things like the things people really like to eat are like fun things to grow. Yeah.
Where can people get your stuff if they want to?
Yeah. Well, we're sold out for this season.
For the CSA?
Yes, for the CSA.
And then as far as you just sell surplus to like wholesale or whatever? Yeah,
so I'm a part of our local like farmer member owned cooperative. And so our co-op offers the CSA. So I have certain crops that I grow for that CSA. Some of the additional things that we have go to like other box programs, a few like a random customer. Well, they're not random, but a few additional customers.
Right.
Yeah. Not a lot of other kind of retail opportunities to find us, but besides our CSA and our co-op CSA.
Do you envision yourself getting bigger and doing more of that?
Yeah. Yes.
I see your face light up. You're like,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I think, yes, absolutely. I think my early seasons growing vegetables felt like I really wanted this experience of something small. I think sort of like in response to like growing up around big farms.
Yeah.
And I think as I mature and sort of understand, just the complexities of farming that I don't know, our food system a little bit more. I've also I've seen other businesses grow, not necessarily farms, and I've seen how that can really offer better jobs to people. And I think that I definitely want to grow mostly because I think I really want to cultivate a farm that allows my staff to move into like leadership roles. And it feels like some of that happens with growth.
Right.
Like as you grow, there's more opportunities to kind of dial in what you're doing or learn something new or take on leadership, be a lead. And so I think that there's elements of that are possible at the size that I'm at now, but I definitely envision growing. And I love working in the field, and I really struggle to get myself out of there, but I also really like running my business. And so I think as I continue to do that, I want a business to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have 5-ish acres.
Yes.
Now, ideally, what would your dream be? 10 acres.
I mean, I'm not
50 acres.
No,
like
I'm not that big. Maybe like 20 or 20. Yeah. 20 or 30. I don't know. Things change all the
Totally.
time. Yeah. But I think, it seems like our customers really like what we're doing. We haven't struggled to sell our food and flowers the last couple seasons. So I think as more growing space becomes available, we'll kind of keep trying to grow appropriately.
Yeah. And being able to produce more probably opens more doors to different buyers that you can sell to, right?
Yeah. I think there's obviously efficiencies of scale. And so we really sell everything pretty much retail because we're growing at a scale where we need to get our retail prices.
Right.
So I think, as you grow a little bit, you have the opportunity to move into some of those like larger buyers or some of the wholesale avenues.
Yeah, because some of those bigger buyers will be like, well, okay, we'll do that, but you need to guarantee that you're going to have carrots for me,
Totally.
Twice a week for this much time, and I need this much for all these stores, and it's like, that's more than we can do.
Yeah, and I think once you start getting into, grocery and some of those bigger things, that's even a sometimes bigger scale, and it's important that you're really well set up for like food safety and distribution, and there's some of these bigger infrastructure things that come with scaling to that size too.
How do you deal with some of that stuff at the scale you're at now?
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with, because I talk with farmers that are farming on a much bigger scale, and they have just mountains of paperwork to deal with, and they want to, have a clean product, but at the same time, they're like, feel like they're drowning.
Sure, totally. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're really small, and there's like some of the requirements are tiered based on your size, and there's a lot of information on that. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
I think what I found for me is that often the record keeping required for different certifications actually helps me stay more organized, because otherwise I'm just a lot more frazzled, and it also gives like crew some guidelines to follow kind of explicitly, which is great. But you saw it. The listeners haven't seen it. We were able to get a grant for a shipping container that we use as a wash station. And so
and office.
And kind of office, yes. We built that out to meet like food safety recommendations. We can clean it really well. We can close it up. And we're just doing the best we can. We want our food to be safe for consumers too.
So at your level, what kind of certifications do you need to have? Like, are you all organic?
Oh, yeah, no, we're not. Yeah, and we grow organically, but we're not organic. I find that having a direct relationship with our customers is they trust us and we share how we grow everything. And so we haven't gone that extra step of being certified.
Why not? If you're already kind of following organic practices, why wouldn't you do the certification?
Yeah, that's
I know it's not free
totally.
for one.
Yeah, I think it's less about the cost. I think some of it is like just it's another thing to do. Like, the business management side is not something I'm always like prioritizing. So some of it's just that I just haven't done it.
Yeah,
I think I farm in a shared farming site too, and I think, like we share equipment, and there's other things going on, and so it feels simpler to be able to just share with people what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely on my radar.
Yeah.
It's definitely something I would do or could do.
Yeah. I also hear from conventional farmers that they would love to be able to, have this sounds bad, I guess, but like a better story about the food that they grow because it's close to organic, but they still need the flexibility every once in a while to use a little bit of this or a little bit of that.
Sure.
They don't do very much at all.
Sure.
But that excludes them from having that kind of all or nothing label.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. I don't know that we necessarily we're following practices, but I do think it can take away your ability to use the best tool, in certain situations for certain kinds of farms. I totally see that. It can kind of, you can't use the best tool at the time you're kind of limited to these certain guidelines. But for me, I think it's probably mostly just a me thing.
What about other stuff? I mean, because there are a lot of different boxes, even at your size. Like you said, the levels of regulation are tiered based, a bigger operation is probably going to have more rules to follow.
Yeah.
Which can be a really good thing for small farms to be able to do what they need to do. But you still have to, check quite a few boxes probably to be doing this.
Yeah. There's like food safety regulations. I'm sure of FSMA and GAP. And so, they're rolling those rules out and asking, there's different dates of compliance, but we are like doing what we need to do, basically. Yeah. I think one thing that I think is that my experience working on like larger farms in like a fruit cannery, or if that's what they call it. That's
what we called it when I was a kid.
I feel like that's what I called it. Yeah. We were following really, really strict food safety like guidelines and like testing and measuring and checking things all the time. And I think having that as part of my farming experience puts me in a good place to understand and kind of have some experience with that.
So why small farming, like what you do?
Sure.
Why are you passionate about that level? Or versus, if you love farming, I mean, you could come back to Whatcom County and like work on a bigger farm.
Sure.
But you're passionate, I can tell about this. I want to hone into like what are the values that drives that?
Sure. Yeah. I do. I love what I do. Yeah. I love it a lot. I think, I don't want to say that there's like one right size. I think this is the size of farm that I'm at now. And I think for me, what really drives me are people. And that, maybe earlier on in my farming career, it was like really like environmental sustainability, or then it was like feeding people. And I think now I really just care about people. And so for me at this size, like part of it is like, how well can I manage people? Like what's a crew that I can maintain? Like what's a customer base that I feel like I can connect with? And Some of it is like just like we're this size because of certain resources that are limited. And I think, I really, I guess, that's a great question.
Well, go back to, I mean, you mentioned that maybe it's not as much of like the number one thing,
Sure.
but environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
Talk about that. How does that affect what you're doing here?
Totally. Yeah. I think part of what got me interested in like mixed vegetable farming was this idea of, how we're caring for resources. And I think that my work experiences leading up to my own farm have taught me a lot about soil management and a lot of environmental different kind of strategies. And so that's super important to me, like the impact that I'm having physically in the world, and how I'm choosing to make decisions about this place is really important.
Yeah, you're like right on the sliver of river. Or like, what is this here? What?
It's called Lake Beecher.
Lake Beecher. Cool.
Yeah. Yep. It's
Awesome.
Yeah. When the river, the Snohomish River is right behind us. Mm-hmm. So when that water gets high, it backflows and fills this lake. But otherwise, it's fed by, like a natural, I think, like some sort of whatever that's called.
An artesian well, one of those. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Crazy.
Yep. And then the river's right here. Yeah. We're right in it.
So you said your season earlier. You were talking about your season gets truncated
Yes.
by flood season.
Yeah.
So does the farm itself actually flood here?
Yeah, this whole entire farm will go underwater.
Like where we're sitting here?
Yes, by several feet.
Have you seen it that deep?
Yes.
So like,
No. Maybe like 2 feet in this area. Yeah. The
Crazy.
high ground over there is the only, it's the only high ground.
and that's crazy because I feel like we're up on a hill a little bit from down in there where the lake is. It gets deep out there.
It does get deep out there. Yeah. It's wild.
Does it wash some of your stuff away? Like, how do you have your like hoop houses and stuff?
Yeah, so those are totally underwater. We plan on it. We know kind of what our earliest possible flood date is, and so we're getting everything out of the field. There are some high areas. They call it like a critter pad, which is basically like an elevated area. Historically, that's where you'd put your critters when it was flooding, but that's where equipment goes. So 2 seasons ago, we had a flood event 2 weeks earlier than ever before. So that was frazzling. But normally we consider October 31st to be our earliest flood date. So yeah, we're like pulling materials out of the field. We're prepping for it. We're ready if it comes. And then we can flood anytime over the winter, really until early April. And the farm isn't totally flat, so the water doesn't cover the whole farm exactly the same. There's low zones and there's higher areas. So I'm trying to plan where my fall crops are to be in my highest area in case I get a small flood. I can still leave things in the field and harvest. So that's another element in the matrix.
Well, and you're close to the river. You have this lake here, so you're surrounded by like wetlands and wildlife habitat.
Yeah.
How does that play into how you farm?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that we're always trying to be conscientious of, how we're kind of interacting with what's around us, what we choose, like what we use for pests, and how, like the fertilizer that we use, like what. Just trying to be really conscientious about sort of maintaining balance, in a kind of like a very like man-made, farming is really a manipulation of nature. So we're like trying to do the best that we can while really controlling something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way to really raise enough food to feed people without manipulating nature somehow.
Yeah.
Like we couldn't just like forage
It
like
seems
wild
like
animals and really survive with the number of people that we have in this country,
Yeah.
on this planet right now.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that to
Yeah.
I would guess, but yeah.
Well, to stay on this environmental sustainability thing,
Sure.
and we were talking about the very specific stuff like right here,
Yeah.
but to go totally to the other end and
Sure.
like climate change and all
Sure.
of that, how does that inform your farming and your thoughts on the
Yeah.
food system?
Sure. Well, I guess like in a much like me personally, in like a longer term thinking, I guess it feels like the weather feels different from year to year.
Yeah.
You know, we're in the middle of a 70-degree day in May. We've been irrigating since April. That's like wild. I think I used to really think that farming required like this idea of like being in one place for your lifetime. And I think that some of it is I just hold farming much looser, and like I feel like my farm is me and my customers and my crew and my idea, and much less like this spot. And I think that part of that is just access to land, and part of that is recognizing that like things may change over time.
And what about like the carbon impacts of what you do, or what, in some cases, what you don't do, because you are very like close to the consumer, small farm focus.
Yeah.
You're focused on soil health, things like that.
Yeah.
That
I hope we
plays
have
into
a low
that like
impact.
big picture climate
Totally.
change stuff too.
Totally. Yeah. I think that we have the opportunity to make positive change, and hopefully we're caring for our soil well, we're keeping our food close to us. We're trying to make smart decisions about like what inputs we bring into the farm, and that's not just like fertilizer, that's like the materials that we're using, kind of everything, and trying to have a positive impact. Yeah.
The one I really struggle with is plastic.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Because it's like it can do a lot of amazing things,
Yes.
and can help you grow organically, and it can help with soil health and all these
Totally.
things. But at the same time, it's like I really would rather use a lot less plastic.
Totally. Yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
appropriate and what's
Sure,
not?
yeah. And I think like in a broader sense, like just more broadly, these are like the kinds of conversations that I'm trying to have with my crew or with my consumers. Like an example of this is we used to pack our CSA boxes in waxed boxes. They're durable, and members could return them and we could use them again. In COVID, we were like, we don't really want to get anything back.
Yeah.
You can just keep that. And we just use cardboard boxes, and all of our members have been asking like, when are we going back to the reusable boxes?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, so technically like they aren't recyclable, and we can't really sanitize them, and it takes a lot less human time to like build these cardboard boxes, and there's these like little efficiencies, and so there's so many decisions that are really nuanced. Plastic is another example. Like, well, we may put plastic over this bed and then we don't have to weed. So that's
Right.
like we're using this one thing, but we're saving our bodies. And I'm like, I'm able to offer a better job. A job with
Well,
less weeding is a better job.
And you don't have to either use an herbicide, whether it's conventional or organic.
Sure.
And you also don't have to do as much tillage, which is also
Sure.
not good for soil health.
Totally. And so some of it is just,
Such a trade-off.
It is. Yeah. I think every decision, I am really like, I think maybe to a fault, like try to be really intentional and thoughtful about the decisions that I make. And I think that like I think like knowing your grower and hopefully trusting them is like is great, because then hopefully you have a values alignment, and you just trust that they're making the best decision for the situation. But some things it's really hard to know. I don't think that there's like it's really hard to know.
My personal opinion on some of that is that close to home, locally grown food, that ideal kind of there's lots of good things that you can accomplish, right?
Yeah.
But to me, that's like always the top of the list.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
even if it doesn't maybe check this box or that box, does it check that one?
Sure. Yeah. And I think, yeah, of course, of course I support that. You know, that's like I'm building a business off of people valuing that opportunity and relationship. But like you can put the other hat on and be like, well, like right across the mountains, like all these crops grow better with less inputs, and like what's the drive across versus like the extra labor and greenhouses I have to build to grow tomatoes, and like literally every, you know, you can really get into the weeds on every decision. And I think at some point you really have to trust that you know, progress over perfection, that you're, you know, getting better all the time, and that you're making the best decision that you can in the moment.
Maybe that's because sometimes in the local food scene they talk about like the radius, how far away your food came from. And in my mind, I keep that a bit bigger, I think, than some people do.
Sure.
Like there's some people, it feels like they need all their food to come within 5 miles.
Sure.
And that's only possible for a few people. Some people it's more like 50 miles.
Yeah.
To me, it's like more the state in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
If not closer.
Yeah. I think I like what you're saying is also kind of making me think of this like a whole nother element of this, which is sort of like food access.
Yeah. And
how, like, again, I'm running a small farm. I believe in local food. I believe in growing things like sustainably. I'm also producing a product that isn't accessible to everyone. And by kind of assigning like morality to one thing versus another, we're sort of adding to this complex issue of like food access and if our food, like, it's great that it's local and organic and all these other ideals like we were just talking about, but if that makes it so bougie, for lack of a better term, or so expensive that a lot of people can't afford it, then are we really making large scale change? Yeah, or I guess like maybe the way that this is like this is a thing I think about. This isn't a thing I have like a thesis on, but I guess I wonder, you know, sometimes if the way that we're talking about it is harmful, if we're saying that, like, you know, I think my food has to be more expensive because of how I'm growing it and how I pay people and the scale that I'm at. Like, that's kind of a fact. But by saying that somehow that it's better than something else, and then I don't know. I think it gets really complicated, and that's like the word I use for everything that I don't understand.
Yeah.
But
that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I always come back to this, and I apologize to people who listen to the podcast who hear me always bring it back to this, because there are a lot of different versions of this. But the simplest one is the organic versus non, which we've kind of touched on earlier from, you know, different facets of that issue. Yeah. But there's one where, like, is something good or bad, black or white? Yeah. That oversimplifies it.
Yeah. Well, it's cozy. It's cozy to say things are yes or no, and the reality is that we live in the middle.
And from what you just said, which sparked something in my brain, which is that by default, if you say something is great, my product is good, my product is better, you're naturally saying something else is worse. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. Sure. But I think that's kind of what you're saying, is it's one thing to be positive about something, it's another thing to be disparaging about something else.
Totally.
Sometimes it's appropriate to be disparaging.
Totally. Yeah,
but other times it's like, no, like, we're pumped about doing this. Yeah. But maybe somebody else does something different.
Yeah, and I think, I guess I just... Yeah, I guess I don't have like the perfect words to put to it, but I just think like it creates to me it creates like a social issue, a food access issue, like a social justice issue, to say that these certain things are just objectively better and like morally right and that they're only available to certain people. So we got to either like fix the system or not tell some people that like they can't access this thing that is like, you know, the right thing, you know.
And who's all been involved in that decision of what's the right thing? I mean, even with the strong movement right now towards like racial equality and social justice on that level, how many of those various diverse communities have been involved in even developing what that vision or ideal is?
Sure. Well, I think that they have been. Yeah. And I think that we don't always be intentional about listening to their voices. Yeah. I think that in my experience, I've learned so much from like BIPOC farmers, and even have really been like humbled to realize that a lot of how I farm, the business model that I have, the farming practices that I use, like those have been brought to us and kind of like cultivated by those communities. And so I think I do think a big answer is looking to our communities of color, for answers to these questions. I think
diverse cultures. Food is like a cornerstone of culture. Like it's art, it's nourishment, it's something that, you know, families gather around. And yes, there is this certain, you know, Anglo way of, you know, that's been kind of like, well, this is the in America or in the West, this is how we see what's good for food. Well, let other cultural perspectives inform that, and there's going to be different values, and then that's going to affect how you're farming.
Totally.
Like we were talking about before we started recording, like bugs and food.
Yeah.
You know, we have this cultural idea that there should never ever be a bug anywhere near food, but the reality is there's bugs that live around where your food is grown.
Totally.
And so what length is it appropriate to go to eradicate every last gnat that might have landed on some food?
Totally.
And someone from a different country, a different cultural background may totally value that differently.
Sure. Yeah. I think that we kind of have an obsession with things being perfect. And I think like we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot from folks who like, I don't quite know like how to say it, but yeah, like we want things to be so perfect, and there's so much value in like living in progress. Yeah. Just like what I was saying, or like having some understanding for the complexity of like what is pest management, and like this is the complexity of it, and what is a perfect vegetable, and what does that cost?
Exactly.
You know, and so I think we really, I struggle with this. I want everything to look perfect, and I would like to have the perfect answer, but the value really comes in not having that and working through that process.
And how much of that value is a product of, you know, your cultural background, the political philosophy of, you know, the system that you've lived in and your family back generations has lived in. It all led to that value being there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And not everyone came from that same background. I guess that's been the eye-opening thing for me that's been really healthy as the focus has shifted to those important conversations.
Sure.
To think, oh yeah, there's so many things I take for granted, but why?
Sure.
And I think it's really important around food.
Yeah, yeah.
So what's next?
Okay.
I mean, we talked about what your dreams are, but what do the next few years hold? What moves are you going to make?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, I'm open to a lot of different ways that the next few years can look. I think I have kind of maxed out the area that I'm leasing here. So, you know, one option is just continuing to kind of hone in on what we're doing and getting more efficient and kind of really like doing a really great job at this size, and another option could be finding a different place somewhere a little bit bigger. I think land ownership isn't in my near future, and I think I've really changed my opinion about whether or not I need to do that. Yeah. So yeah, a potential move, maybe staying. I think I really have been enjoying kind of putting together this education piece for my customers, and so that kind of feels like a really fun kind of road to go down. So I think we'll continue to be creating new resources and fun things for them, for sure.
Well, thank you for growing delicious food, beautiful flowers.
Yeah.
And being out here and making it happen.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, you've had to make some sacrifices to make this all work.
Yeah, of course. Yep. Yeah, but I also choose this, I have a lot of options available to me, and this is what I've chosen. And I think, for me, I can often fall into really getting into it about how hard it is and doesn't anyone understand? And then I'm like, oh, I pick this every day. I choose to do this, and I really love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. These are the stories of the people who grow your food.